Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody had an enjoyable season, even with the year that was in it, and everyone got a few animals for the freezer. Tonight I'm hoping to show you some simple dishes and some few tricks that you can use your animals up with. Last week you saw some cuts from Hicks. They did a great job in showing you some basic cuts. I'm going to try and use those cuts tonight in the dishes we're doing. So what I'm going to start off with, because it's integral to a few dishes we're doing tonight, is stock. Okay, in the industry we would do a stock with veal bones or with beef bones. It's a very long process and it goes over the course of maybe 2 days. The final product will be the jus that you get on the plate. For tonight, what we're going to do is any bones that you have left over. So basically, you boned out your animals, your leg bones, rib bones. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of gelatin on a deer carcass. It's no harm if you can butcher, that you go maybe get a few beef bones as well to mix in with them. You will get quite a strong flavour from the venison bones in your stock. The beef bones will actually add gelatin, which will actually help you get a thicker stock for a finish. So what I've done is I've roasted off a few of the bones that we had. There's a little bit of meat left on those, not a lot. Give them a good roasting in the oven, make sure it's all dried out, so that way the meat won't actually flake and go grainy in your stock. What I also do is blacken a few onions. Just in a dry pan, half an onion, you can leave the skins on, blacken the onions. This gives colour to your stock. It helps give colour to your stock, the onion skins and the blackness will as well. So they're kind of still raw, but they are blackened. So in with our bones, go the onions. Right, that's quite it. The veg, I don't like putting too much veg in, because what happens is this is on for maybe an hour or so, it's boiling, it's going to go cloudy and it's going to go grainy if the veg breaks down too much. So what we do is we just take a carrot, peel it, keep it as big as possible as you can if you in large pieces. So just literally cut it in half and like that. Drop those in. I put a bay leaf. I have some here. I do some bay leaf and some celery. So again, keeping the celery in large pieces because you don't want it to break up and go grainy. That all goes in, a little bit of thyme and rosemary and a clove of garlic. The garlic just half, I'm not even worry too much about it. Cover that with water, cold water. Always put cold water into the stock, because if you put hot water in, it actually will make it go cloudy as well. The idea is that you're left with a lovely clear stock at the end of this. You need to skim the stock as well, so as the stock is heating up, you never boil it, you just bring it to a little simmer, and as that's going on, a lot of fat and any impurities will rise to the surface, so you have to be constantly skimming it to help it keep it clear. So just onto your ring over here, and we just gently let that, we don't want it to boil at all, so just a gentle simmer. That'll take about an hour and a half. Keep skimming it, and you'll have a lovely clear stock for finish. That's the stock base we will use for our sauces and also for our stew that we're going to do now shortly. Okay, so our stock is on, just coming to the boil, it's simmering away. I should have said that Ed pointed out last week that any bits of sinew or silver skin and that kind of stuff is full of gelatin. They can actually all go into your stock as well, and it will help to get more gelatin stock. Okay, the first thing we're going to do tonight is a stew. So for the stew, the cuts of meat we will use will be the shoulders and the neck. The reason we use those cuts is because they're full of collagen, which is a good protein, which actually helps. It breaks down, it gets a softer mouthfeel, I suppose, for the meat, and it lends itself better to stewing basically. So we've taken the shoulder, the neck, we cut them in good sized chunks. Don't have them too small, because otherwise it will again break up in your stew. So that's why you often see stew might go grainy, or kind of the meat will be falling apart. We do want it nice and tender, but we don't want it to be completely falling apart. So cut into nice sized chunks. The size, basically everything in the stew should be able to fit on either a spoon or a fork. So that's what we kind of in the kitchens we would kind of cut to. So the first thing we do with the stew is we have our meat. We have to season the meat. So we give it a good sprinkling of salt. This is where your flavour. You should always season the meat beforehand and season throughout the cooking process. It gives a much better flavour to the meat. So I'm just using a bit of sea salt. I don't use pepper. Pepper is more of a spice, and use it in moderation if you are doing it. Okay, so we have the beef. We're going to bring it over here now. We're going to get the pan nice and hot. So either a good cast iron pan or a non-stick if will do as well, but a cast iron is better. So we have our pan now getting nice and hot. We have a little bit of vegetable oil in it. You hear a lot of guys at at times, even chefs' cookery shows will tell you olive oil, olive oil. Don't fry with olive oil. Olive oil burns, has a very low burn temperature, and actually will give an awful bad taste to the meat. So use something like maybe rapeseed oil or a vegetable-based oil. And we have our meat here seasoned. So we have our meat in the pan. We're browning the meat. We want to get a nice caramelization all over the meat. Don't be afraid of over browning it, because it's going to be sitting in stock and it's going to be braising away for a few hours. So you can't really over brown it. You don't want it to go black. So a nice brown colouring is what you want. And give a lovely flavour to the stew. This is an important part of it, because it's where you get a lot of your flavour. Pass it around too much. So there's plenty of contact with the frying pan. And again, don't be too worried about bits of fat or bits of sinew and that kind of stuff in this meat, because that will all help with the stewing process and with flavour. At this point, you often see guys saying to dust your meat in flour. That will help thicken your stew. I don't like to do that, because obviously a lot of people these days are celiacs and other things, so we can use corn flour to thicken it, and that's how we do it tonight. So good brown colour. Now, so we've browned our meat. We've got a nice good brown colour in it all. We're going to set that aside for a minute. Okay, we get a pot. Now for our stew, onion. Now we'll take about, I'll have recipes up for you with these guys, so you'll have all the recipes you'll be able to work towards. We take the onion, just half it, keep the root on it, makes it easier to cut. You want to keep it kind of chunky, okay, because this is going to be, as I say, cooking for a long time, so don't be worried too much. Again, make sure it can fit on a fork or spoon sideways. Okay, so you just into nice chunks. For this recipe we need 2 onions. So these are just white onions. I don't like using red myself, it's just a colour thing in the stews, but there should be no reason you couldn't use a red onion if you felt like it. So, there we go. Now, get a pot suitable enough to take all the meat and the veg. So we put our onion in the pot. Okay. Now garlic, I'll put about 2 cloves of garlic into this. The little trick is with the garlic, split it in half. A lot of time when people get that garlic repeating on that taste, it's because the germ has been left in. The germ of the garlic is actually indigestible, so the little green shoot in the centre, just pull that out of all your garlic. If you use, get your fingers or the tip of a knife to get in there and pull it out. And you won't have as strong a raw garlic taste if any you don't like garlic, but garlic is lovely. Pull that all out. Right. That's it. Then chop your garlic nice and fine. You don't want bits of garlic. So try to stay away from garlic paste and that kind of stuff as well. They just tend to be very bruised and they give you an awful strong garlic flavour. So our garlic goes in with our onion. Now what we're going to do is, again, a little bit of salt. Salt helps break down the vegetables, gets all the onions shredded down a lot quicker. So a nice sprinkling of salt in there. Okay, we're back over to our stove. So a little bit of oil in our pan. Okay, not too much, and we're going to what we call sweating down some. So we want to cook it without any colour really. Okay, if it browns a little bit or catches a bit, don't worry about it. But just we want to have that onion nice and soft. So you can see our onion is being sweated down there. You can see it's starting to get nice and translucent and softer. You don't, as I said, don't try not to burn it, but if it does, don't worry too much. Okay, just keep moving around the pan. And it'll start to break down. Break it down, you get a lot of flavour. Our stock here is been simmering away. It's not boiling. You can see the colour in it is starting to get a nice brown colour from the onion and from the roast bones. So just at this point, as we're passing it or we're near it, we can just give it a little skim, and any impurities, like I said, fats and everything will rise to the top. So we're just skimming off those fats where we can with a ladle around the edges. They usually gather around the edges. You just do a swirl like that and it'll push into the edge and you can pull off any fat. Just helps to give the stock a cleaner finish. Alright, so here we have our onions now. They're sweated down, they're nice and soft, and garlic as well. So now what we're going to do is we'll put red wine into this stew. So use good wine. If you can't drink it, don't cook with it. It's a good rule of thumb. So about 200 mils. We want about 20% red wine to start. We don't want it tasting too much like red wine. And use something like Cabernet Sauvignon, it's nice. And also a glass of it afterwards. So we want to reduce this wine down to nearly like a glaze. So it'll start to thicken, it'll get syrupy. So we're just a gentle heat. Again, not too much heat because it will burn around the sides and stuff. So it's a nice gentle heat and get that reducing down. You can see our red wine is almost fully reduced. Our onions have turned red, that's no problem. They're nice and syrupy consistency. So what we do now next is our stock. Now what I'm using tonight is basically store-bought, it's Knorr stock cubes. And the packs, the small packs. You could use our own stock as you were showing, I was showing you how to do. If not, you can use this as well. I'm going to use this tonight just to show you how it can be done, okay? So, recipe calls for about 2 litres of it. So that goes into our onions. Okay, and we're just going to slowly bring that up in temperature. Just as our stock is about to come to the boil here, it's obviously very watery, there's no real body to it because we use the stock cubes. What I'm going to do is a little bit of corn flour. You want about a good, maybe 2 tablespoons of corn flour. You mix it with a little bit of cold water to make up kind of like a sludge like this. And what we do is we'll just pour a small bit in and whisk. And as that comes to the boil, it'll start to thicken. Sometimes we may need to go back. You don't want it too thick, but you want a nice little body to it. You want the viscosity kind of so it'll sit on the plate rather than being too watery when it's finished. And as it boils, it will thicken. You start to see it there now. It's starting to thicken up. So roughly 2 tablespoons of that should do the trick. As I said, sometimes each one can be different. You might need to go back and just adjust that gradually. So now it's a nice thickness to it there. So what we're going to do now is add back in our meat, okay, that we browned off. Okay, so when our meat goes back in, that's still more or less raw, it's just browned. Any juices or anything that may have come off, go back into that. Okay. At this stage, I put in a few aromats. So what I'd like to add in is some bay leaf. These are dried porcini mushrooms. You can get them in anything we bought here tonight, or any vegetables, everything can be gotten in either Super Value or any your major supermarkets. So these are dried porcini. So I put a few of those in. It gives a lovely kind of a mushroomy, kind of a deep, rich flavour to them. So if you don't like mushrooms, leave them out. Feel free to leave them out. Okay. So that now is coming to the boil. So we just turn that down to a bare simmer, and we can leave that cook away there for a few minutes. I don't put the veg in at this stage because obviously it's going to be cooking for a few hours. Our veg doesn't take hours to cook, so all you'll be left with will be a big bowl of mess at the end of it. So we'll cook this out first, probably for about 40 minutes here on top of the stove at a nice gentle simmer to get that meat starting to tenderise and break down. Okay, so our meat is gently simmering away there, it's not boiling, it's a nice gentle simmer. For the veg that we're going to put into our stew, you can put any kind of root veg you really want in, feel free to experiment, to change around. I use parsnip, carrot, celery and leek. That's what I usually put into it. And potatoes, I'll go through that towards the end. Okay, so our leeks, just use the white part of the leek, okay? You have to be careful that sometimes you can both give all your veg a good wash. So again, we need to cut them chunky, but not so chunky they can't fit on a fork or a spoon. So our leek will be cut into nice rounds like this. Okay, nice rounds like that. The carrot, again, we're leaving it top and tail it. We're leaving it nice and chunky. Depending on the size, if it's a very big carrot, you may have to half it down in size, but just as long as they're all the same, roughly the same size. This enables them all to cook at the same time as well, so you're not left with some raw and some overcooked. Okay, so as I said, if you want to put sweet or something in, feel free to do that as well. So again, our parsnip will be cut more or less the same size as the carrot. Now some of recipes, veg will cook quicker than other veg. Carrot tends to be a little longer to cook. Celery actually can hold it quite well. So again, maybe when you're cutting it, just think about that with the size you're cutting it. So there we go, that's about 2 sticks of celery, carrot, our leek and our parsnip. Okay. Now if we're putting potatoes into your stew, these will go in last, obviously, because they can, break up and you'll have a very messy stew. So what I use is Mars Piper, a nice waxy potato. Try not to use like a floury potato because they just break up too quickly. So a good waxy potato like you'd use for a chip. And again, cut them at a nice chunky size, kind of the same size as your other veg that was going into the stew. And they will be the last to go into the stew. Chunks that size. Okay, so our stew's been cooking away there for quite a while on top of the stove. The meat is getting soft to the touch. It's still firm and holding together, but it's getting soft to the touch. So we're maybe 3/4 of the way there. What we're going to do now is the veg we prepared and chopped earlier on. We're just going to drop that into our stew. So everything but the potato. Okay. So our carrot, our celery, leek, and parsnip are going in there. If we had it in sooner, as I said, it would just break up and you would end up with a soup more than anything. At this point, a little bit of rosemary and thyme goes in as well. You can pick that out afterwards, so don't worry if it's a big sprig. Already we have our bay leaf in there. Okay, so we're going to put that back on top of the stove here. Now, at this stage, you can either put it into another pot, we'll say an earthenware pot, and put it into a low oven and finish it in an oven, or by all means just cook it out on top of the stove as well. So we're going to the heat back up a little bit. I'm going to let that stew wait there and let our vegetables soften and impart more flavour into our stew as well. Okay, so at this stage our stew's been cooking away for quite a while. Our meat is lovely and tender, our veg are nice and soft. It's got about another 15 minutes or so of cooking, but we're going to put in the potatoes now. It's not a bad idea now at this stage to check. Just give it a taste, see if it needs more salt or seasoning. The stock cubes can be a little bit salty, so be very careful with that. This one doesn't need any more seasoning because we've had salt in throughout the process. So we're just going to add our potatoes in. Make sure they're all covered into our stew, and we'll let that simmer away there again for about another 15 or 20 minutes just to soften those potatoes. So the next dish we're going to do is a dish using the backstrap or the fillet or whatever you want to call it of the animal. When the prime cuts, doesn't take very long to cook. Quick cook is all it takes, mostly in the pan. We want to keep that nice and pink as well. We don't want to overcook that meat. We'll get to that later on. For now, we're going to show you how to make the sauce with it. This is basically, I suppose in culinary terms, a bourguignon sauce or a French kind of red wine sauce. It's going to contain mushrooms, some bacon, onion and garlic again, some herbs. So this time we take our onion, okay, we take out the stem. We're going to cut it a lot finer this time, okay, so we have a just smaller, we go down the onion like this, leave the root on the onion, it helps to hold the onion together. Okay, so we just go down a nice even intervals down along the onion, one way, and then lengthways across the onion 3 or 4 times so you get nice little small little dice, okay? Now obviously take your time, go slow. A good kitchen knife is always, and a good sharp knife is always important, because otherwise you just bruise your onion and it will taste very oniony obviously. So what we're trying to do is slice the onion more than chop it. So we're left with these nice little pieces of onion, as you can hopefully see there. Okay, that will go into our pot. Okay, so as I said, you'll have recipes for all this. So into our pot, and then we put in some garlic as well, again, finely chopped garlic. With the germ taken out, it's just less potent. I won't tend to repeat on you as much if it ever does give you trouble. Okay, so again, nice and fine. Try not to smash it too much. Okay, and that's into our pot as well. Okay, so now we're going to sweat this down, same as we did with the stew. It's just going to be gently sweated down without any colour. More so with the sauce, you don't want to get it blackened or browned. So I'll do a nice low heat. Again, at this point, we're going to put a little bit of salt because it just helps break it down and brings out the flavour. So the first thing we're going to do for our sauce is bacon lardons. Now, if you can get pancetta, it's probably the best. It's slightly cured. If not, just get streaky bacon will do. Try not to get smoked unless you really like that smoky flavour. You can use it. I'm not saying you can't, but I prefer to use non-smoked streaky bacon. So we're cutting into what's called lardons, which are just little thin strips. Try and have them all the same size. This will be the scene in your sauce, so presentation, just have a little thought about the presentation of it. So we're just cutting into nice little thin lardons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to heat our pan, and we're going to fry off the lardons in that first, and then we're going to take them out, and we'll fry everything else then in the pan afterwards, so it's got a nice flavour to it. And we'll add these back in at a later stage. So we have our lardons into a nice hot pan, and just crisp them up, make sure they don't stick together, spread them out a bit. Nice bacony flavour. So now as you can see, our bacon is nicely browned, and it's nice and crispy. We're going to leave that to the side for now. So in our pan here we're at our onion. It's sweated down, it's nice and soft now, and it's cooked. So what we're going to do now is mushrooms. So you can use wild mushrooms, you can use button mushrooms, whatever you fancy, whatever you prefer. I've used some wild here, and I have some Paris brown mushrooms as well. Again, you can get them in Tesco, Super Value, any supermarket should stock them these days. So our onion is nice and soft. Into this we add our mushrooms. We're going to fry those off. Okay, just a nice heat. Obviously, keep them moving so your onion doesn't burn as well. Just want to gently cook them. As you can see, that's our mushroom and our onions there, just gently cooking away. Now our mushrooms and our onions are cooked. Now for a little bit of red wine. This will give colour and body to your sauce. For sauces, I like to use 10% red wine. So if you're using, for argument's sake, a litre of stock, we're going to use 100 millilitres of red wine. So a good plug for the sauce. And again, we're going to reduce that down so it's almost like a syrup before we add in our stock. That burns off any alcohol, just a nice body to our sauce. Okay, so our red wine now is reduced with our mushrooms and our onion and garlic. So at this stage we're going to pour in our stock. This again is the stock we've made ourselves, or if you wish, the bought-in stock. Okay, so we're also going to, again, because as I was saying, it has no, it's not thick enough basically, it has no body to it. It's quite watery, so we're going to add in again another little bit of corn flour, and that will just give us a consistency and a thickness to our sauce. So as it's boiling up, we just add that in. If that mix, you may need to go back and adjust. And that boils, it will actually turn clear again. Sometimes it goes a little bit cloudy at the start. We have our stock in here, it's thickened up nicely, so we're going to add back in our bacon. Okay, any bit of juices or fat as well, don't worry about it, get it in there. And a little bit of thyme and rosemary as well. We can pick that out and just let that simmer and infuse there at a very, very gentle heat. It doesn't need to be boiling or juicing anymore, so just let it tip away there nice and easily. Okay, so next is our back strap we're going to cook. So we cut it to fillet this with some small calf that I managed to get. Obviously, if it's fallow or red, it's going to be a lot bigger. But the cooking principle is exactly the same, so nice bit of seasoning on it. A good coating. Don't season too long before you put it in the pan because it actually draws moisture out of the meat and it won't get a nice browning. So just a nice bit of salt in it. Into your pan. What you want is a nice even brown colour on every side. So, start moving around the pan a little bit to help it to brown up. Again, use a vegetable oil, not an olive oil. You can see that there now, it's nice and caramelised. That's where you get your flavour off the meat. It's called a Maillard reaction, and it's browning the meat. It gives a lovely flavour to the. Too little, then you won't get that nice meaty, smoky flavour. So, the two sides as well. Okay, so that's evenly browned on all sides. As you can see, lovely, nice golden brown colour. Just to finish it, you can drop in a little bit of butter. And just don't let the butter burn too much. Just a little bit of the basting. A little bit of herb in there as well, like rosemary or thyme. With a nice flavour to it. This is how we would finish all meats in a restaurant. So we've got a lovely browned piece of meat, which is still not fully cooked. It's still very rare. You can feel it to the touch. It's quite there's a lot of give in it. So what we do is onto a little flat. Now you could leave it in the pan if you wanted, maybe not ideal with the butter, but onto a little tray or something and into an oven. Every oven is different. A household oven won't be as good as these professional ovens. So 180 degrees, maybe in a household oven we'll have to go to 190, but I would reckon maybe 7 to 8 minutes thereabouts. You should have a nice pink piece. Okay, so our meat's been in there about 7 minutes. As you see, it's nice and pink, I would say, inside that. Now we have our plate here, okay, our sauce. Just a little bit of mash for this. You can put carrots with it, you can put broccoli, peas, whatever you fancy really, to be honest with you, as a side veg. We're going to finish the sauce with a little bit of chive, just chopped chive. Again, try not to bruise that chive, keep it nice and just crisp. The meat is very important to let the meat rest, okay? And it should, I suppose, rule of thumb is leave it rest as long as it was cooking. That just helps all the fibres to relax and all the juices flow back through the meat. That gives you a nicer tasting and tendier piece of meat. Okay, so this has been resting here now for a while. We will cut this in half so you can see it's lovely pink on the inside. Luckily, okay, if this was a large piece, we could just put 2 pieces on like that. Our sauce then, get a nice few mushrooms, bacon lardons, a bit of everything, and just pour at the top like that. So nice kind of a ragu-y. There's plenty of garnish on the plate. And a nice bit of sauce, okay? And that is just goes well with any kind of venison, any game, woodcock, even anything like that. It will go. The same sauce will go fantastic with. So a nice hearty dinner. Obviously, you can have a larger piece of venison if you so wish. Our stew has been cooking away there for a few hours. Our meat is lovely and tender. All our veggies is nicely cooked, but it's still holding its shape. Just as you're plating up, if you do see anything like that, like the piece of herbs that we put in, like the rosemary and thyme or the bay leaves, just pick those out. They're not. It's not the end of the world if they do go into the pot. So we've our bowl here, and we're just going to get a nice bit of meat in, and an even distribution of the different veg. A bit messy. Take it. See, not too much sauce. You don't want to swim in sauce. It's quite rich. You won't eat as much as you think you'd eat. It'd be nice to finish with a little bit of just chopped parsley. Lighten it a little bit. Nice glass of red wine with that, and you're made. Okay, next thing we're going to do is talk about, anyway, at least, is burgers. When you break down a carcass of an animal, you have often loads of offcuts left over, little bits of meat and strips and trimmings. Keep all that and mince them down. When you are mincing, just a lot of guys use these. I often see it very small little mincers and ones they kind of buy cheaply. A good mincer you have to pay for, okay? It's all about the motor. Smaller ones tend to overheat, and it's actually quite dangerous if you're forcing too much through at a time, because it actually can heat up your meat and it can actually cause it to spoil or slightly cook or spread bacteria. So you want to do as quickly as possible and keep the meat as cold as possible. A particular right way to do them, I use 2/3 venison to 1/3 minced pork belly, okay? Just to get a little bit of fat through it. You need fat in a burger. Venison tends to be very lean meat. I don't put venison fat through it because it tastes very strong. Not a lot of people would like that strong flavour if you do have a lot of fat on the animal. Try and trim off as much of it as possible. The pork belly will give you that fat that's required in the burger. I also put a little bit of onion, so I very finely dice my onion, same as we did for the sauce earlier on. You need to cook this, you sweat this down, no colour, a little bit of salt in with that. Don't season your burger because it will actually draw out a lot of juices and stuff. So I just season the onions, and that will be the seasoning that goes into my burger. So sweat that down. You need to leave it cool, okay? Into a fridge or into a freezer, so it's very, very cold when you mix it in through your meat. If not, again, you could cause it to spread bacteria and to spoil. So when that's cooked down, again, I tend to put in either freshly chopped rosemary and thyme and a little bit of savoury if you can get it. If not, herbs of Provence, dried herbs will do fine, or there is a multitude of burger seasonings out there your butcher can get, or you can buy now in many supermarkets. Feel free to experiment and to add those in. So in goes my onion, in goes my meat. I don't use, you can if you want to use a little egg white to help bind it, but I don't think it needs it. Form it with your hands into a burger press as you wish. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but just make sure that there's a lot of air and it is kind of patted nice and tight, that there's no air left inside in the burger mix, and just fry them. And just look, as I said, everyone has an opinion on a burger and how it should be. That's how I do mine. But the ratio, I would say, the ratio of meat, the pork belly to the meat is the most important thing. Everything else after that is open to people to try what they like or experiment with. But 2/3 venison to 1/3 pork belly is what I use. Okay, so our stock has been simmering away for about an hour and a half now. We've been constantly skimming it to get any impurities and fats off the top of it. So just to give you an idea of the colour, it's gotten from the roasting of the bones and the onions. Okay. As you can see, there's a nice brown colour, and it's quite flavoursome. So I don't put any veg into this because it'll just become like a soup really. Okay, so a little bit of mist there. But as you can see, the colour of it, it's a nice golden clear stock, and that can be used instead of the stock cubes, or in both your sauces and the stew.